Up in the Ozark Hills in the state of Arkansas, dozens of people have been working hard, building houses and a new type of community. It's called Return to the Land, and it is a town open to white people only. They are Millennials and Gen Z, and this is a new update of age-old prejudice.
What we've done here is establish a place where we have control over who our neighbors are, and that is just for the sake of preserving, our culture.
And that culture, effectively, we're saying this is a white culture, a whites-only place.
White American culture.
I'm Antoine Michael, and this is The Breakdown. Okay, let's start with the easy part first. First of all, nobody is that pressed to live next to you. Decenter yourself. Your whiteness is not so potent that folks of color are just running to live next door to you, and that is compelling you into the woods, right? But since you're going to segregate yourself out, when you go out there and you're building your homes, leave behind the air conditioning. That's black folks. As a matter of fact, also leave behind the refrigerator as well. That's black folks. Do not take any peanut butter products with you. That's black folks, right? And I'm pretty sure we go on and on and on down the list. That what the argument that they're having in building this community is that they need to preserve and want to preserve their culture. Well, then take your culture with you and take the inventions of other cultures out of the picture that convenience you as millennial and Gen Z white folk who want to be off in the mountains of Arkansas by yourself. Because if the argument is that, you want to preserve your culture and keep your culture going, then we have to talk about the history of colonialism from which you derive, in which case you are an immigrant on these particular lands in the United States. So that gives you a right to quote unquote reclaim the land, as the project is called. So then you would be in the colonial history of coming onto a land, invading it, taking land that does not belong to you, and establishing communities there and saying that you have a right to it vis-a-vis a law that is not native to the land itself. That is your culture. Now that the easy part is over with, right? What is astounding about this is that this is Gen Z and millennial folk, right? And what this makes very clear is what has been stated over time, that racism is taught, that somebody taught these people that, hey, this is what needs to be done. This is how this impacts you as a white person, etc. And this has been their response to what they have been taught. But not only has this been their response to what they have been taught, this is also their response to the 1960s. This whole entire town that they are erecting is a response to the civil rights movement, is a response to the March on Washington, the Freedom Riders, those who sat at lunch counters, those who march and protest, etc. Because inherently what they are saying is that whole moment did away with their culture and made their communities integrated. But here is why you stay in school and you read the books. Because if you're going to go out to the mountains of Arkansas and you're trying to exclude people, then you must necessarily also exclude the government, but what you can't do because you're buying land in the name of a colonial nation state that is occupying land that is inherently not theirs. But that's another conversation for another day, right? But you got to exclude the government, but you can't do that because you need your property deeds. But nonetheless, when we look back at the 1960s, one thing that becomes very, very clear is that black folk were not fighting for integration at the beginning of the civil rights movement. We were fighting for desegregation. We want to be able to go down to the store should we need to navigate larger, broader spaces, right, to get what we need, pay for what we need without being followed around the store, without being harassed because we can afford it, and without being followed home wondering if we will make it home. That's what black folks were asking for desegregation from. Because let's be clear, we owned our own businesses, right? We had our own home builders, etc. And we were so successful at it that you burned it down in each and every instance because black folk were very clear about what to do and how to do it. And you were upset because you could not replicate the same in your community because you did not have the genius and insight to get it done. But when we do look back at the civil rights movement, what becomes very clear is that the project of integration in and of itself is a result of the nation state that is the United States. So if you're going to be mad at someone, you got to be mad at the United States. Because what was going on the world scene at that point in time? We were in the throes of the Cold War, okay? And what the Soviet Union was saying, hey, The United States can't tell us what to do, cannot police the world, because the United States has racial discrimination going on in their nation, that they are excluding people from public spaces by way of race, that you have all of these black people that are being found from trees at the bottom of rivers. You have black women who are being mistreated and sexually assaulted, right? All of these things were going on, and the countries on the other side of this struggle were like, how can you tell us what to do? And this is what is going on in your own nation. So what the United States does is it constructs integration as a nation state project to present to the world that we are a quote unquote integrated democracy where everyone has a voice. So then the Voting Rights Act was not necessarily about getting black people, Latino people, Asian people, etc. to the voting booth. It was about opening up the spaces ostensibly on the surface to where on the world scale, it looked like on the world stage, I say, it looked like everyone had equal access, but they in fact did not, because there's a little process called gerrymandering, right? Now, what is the evidence for this? You got to read Stokely Carmichael's Ready for Revolution, and he's talking about what's happening at the March on Washington. And what's happening behind the scenes. He says this quote, inside the work area, there were government production teams, USIA, Voice of America, etc., posing the volunteers, interracially, of course, shooting miles of film, interviewing workers, asking them, quote, what does this mean to you? Referring to the March on Washington. Why are you here? Quote, smile now, this is going to Russia in Africa, they said. Quote, you couldn't have a demonstration like this. This is what some of the workers were saying who was working for the government, that, quote, you couldn't have a demonstration like this in Moscow or Havana now, could you? No kidding. More than one guy actually said that. Then Stokely Carmichael goes on to say, aha, I thought. So that's the line, huh? American democracy at work. Forget the grievances that bought people here a Cold War propaganda, victory for the government and quote unquote democracy. In other words, the United States government as an entity in and of itself was not concerned about segregation. They were not concerned about what was going on in the lives of black people, Latino people, right? Asian people. What the United States was concerned with is that we are trying to do this thing in the Cold War and we look like fools because of what is going on in this nation. So on the surface, we have to smooth things out. But here at the bottom, we will still make sure that things take place. So if you are going to erect a community in the mountains of Arizona, in the mountains of Arkansas, you got to make sure you have the history right. And you got to make sure that you upset with the right people. Saying that, oh, we wish to preserve our culture. We're being forced to live next to these people. We don't want to live next to you. That was not the ask. Right? We wanted to be able to navigate public space in the event that we needed it so we could get the life-sustaining resources we need and return to our communities in peace. But this is a larger trend that is taking place over in MAGA land, this whole Make America Great Again process that is going on, right? And we have to be very real with the fact that we often look at older folks like Trump, right? Older folks like Mike Johnson, older folks, the baby boomer generation, and we are not paying attention enough to what is happening among millennials and the Gen Z folk. That they have signed onto the line, they are committed to this particular process, and what they are trying to do is roll this back piece by piece, bit by bit. But if you're going to roll it back, leave our stuff over here and take yourself over there and let it be. And let's be clear, right, while I'm here, because the argument has been, go back to where you're from, etc. Let's be very clear about this. Another reason why you need to stay in school, right? When Kwame Nkrumah tried to help black folks get up out of the United States of America, the United States government sent some undercover folks over there, and I'll let you look up the rest, okay? When Marcus Garvey started his ship line and said, hey, black folks, let's get it up out of here and let's move back to Africa, the Back to Africa movement, the United States government did what? They found him guilty of fraud and they shut it down, because the reality of the fact is you won't be able to make it in this nation without us. I'll see you next time. Peace.